accord, which binds the parties to reaching a practical and mutually satisfying agreement through friendly negotiations. Guyana, of course, welcomes President Maduro's commitment to the Geneva Agreement and his acknowledgement that it binds the parties. However, his understanding of the agreement appears to end at Article 3. As we have seen, the first three articles do indeed provide for friendly negotiations through the vehicle of a mixed commission, quote, with the task of seeking satisfactory solutions for the practical settlement of the controversy. But with respect, Venezuela's current reading of the agreement ends too soon. It's like they stopped reading the book of Genesis after the fifth day, before the first humans were created. Maybe the planet would have been better off, but that is not where the story ends. Likewise, the Geneva Agreement does not end after Article 3. President Maduro's letter completely ignores Article 4. As we have seen, that article establishes the procedure for resolving the controversy if the friendly negotiations conducted by the Mixed Commission are unable to produce an agreement. Venezuela itself acknowledges this in its memorandum of 28 November 2019 at paragraph 22C, where it states, without equivocation, that the efforts of the Mixed Commission to seek satisfactory solutions for practical settlement of the controversy, if unsuccessful after 4 years, finally should end with the intervention of the UN Secretary General. Venezuela's second argument, apparently intended as a fallback in anticipated failure of its first one, is that Venezuela, in order to reach a settlement, did not rule out. On the contrary, it proposed, as a last resort, arbitration and judicial settlement if a practical settlement could not be reached within a mixed commission or other political means of settlement. In this passage, at paragraph 114 of its memorandum, Venezuela suggests that judicial settlement is only possible under the 1966 agreement as a last resort, which it goes on to define as after each of the other non-judicial means of settlement identified in Article 33 of the Charter has first been utilized. To this end, Venezuela complains at paragraph 46 that it was contrary to the letter and spirit of this agreement, and particularly of its Article 4.2, to bypass the political means mentioned in Article 33 of the United Nations Charter and directly, unilaterally impose what should be the last resort once the parties mutually agree on the failure of those means. According to Venezuela, at paragraph 71 of its memorandum, in reference to the means mentioned in Article 33, Article 4.2 refers to a successive experimentation of them indicative of a certain preferred sequence. No, Mr. President, it does not. There is nothing in Article 4.2 of the Geneva Agreement or in Article 33 of the Charter that requires the Secretary General to choose the means of settlement of the controversy in any particular order, or to exhaust every one of the other means of settlement listed in Article 33 before he may choose adjudication by the court. To the contrary, the only limitations on the power of the Secretary General to decide on the means of settlement are, first, he must choose from among the means that are listed in Article 33, and second, if the means first chosen fail to resolve the controversy, he must choose another means from among those listed in Article 33 until the controversy is resolved, or until all the means listed in Article 33 are exhausted. There is no requirement whatsoever in Article 4.2 or in Article 33 that he choose the means of settlement in any particular order. On Venezuela's approach, the Secretary General could only decide on settlement by the court after recourse to arbitration, which is absurd. Indeed, Venezuela even refutes its own argument. It acknowledges that the first means of settlement actually chosen by the Secretary General was good offices, and that this was consistent with Article 4.2. But then, at paragraph 78 of its memorandum, it characterizes good offices as, quote, covered by the generic reference to other means of choice, which are the last means listed in Article 33, not the first. So instead of choosing the means of settlement in succession, starting from the first one listed, the second began at the end of the list, and Venezuela made no protest. It accepted that the choice of means was left entirely to the Secretary General's discretion, subject only to the requirement that the means chosen were among those enumerated in Article 33. He did not, therefore, choose adjudication prematurely, as Venezuela erroneously contends. And this brings us to Venezuela's third and final argument. I alluded to this one previously. They suggest that even if the Secretary General was empowered to decide upon the ICJ as the means of settlement, and even if he could make this decision before exhausting the other means listed in Article 33 of the Charter, his decision was not binding upon the parties because it required their mutual consent before it could take effect. For Venezuela, absent the parties' agreement, the Secretary General's decision, in their exact words, quote, can only be taken as a recommendation, close quote. Now, this is an entirely new reading of Article 4.2. As we have already seen, it is inconsistent with the text of that article, which refers explicitly to the Secretary General's choice of the means of settlement as a, quote, decision, not a mere recommendation. And Venezuela's current reading is also contrary to what its foreign minister in 1966 understood as the authority that the parties vested in the Secretary General under Article 4.2. That contemporaneous understanding can be found not only in the foreign minister's address to the National Congress, from which I quoted previously, but in Venezuela's own annex to its memorandum of 28 November 2019 on page 35 at tab 7. There is an unequivocal interpretation that the selection of the means of settlement will be made only by the Secretary General of the United Nations. Plainly, the foreign minister did not understand there to be a need for a special agreement by the parties following a decision by the Secretary General that the means of settlement of the controversy shall be the ICJ. It is not surprising, then, that Venezuela makes no reference to either the text of Article 4.2 or the contemporaneous statements of its foreign minister in support of its unsupportable argument that the only power the Secretary General was given was to make a mere recommendation, and that any such proposal would be contingent on the parties' subsequent approval. In the absence of any support for its argument, Venezuela attempts to manufacture some by attributing a false understanding of Article 4.2 to Foreign Minister Iribarren, one that he never uttered and is contrary to what he actually did say. Venezuela erroneously argues at paragraph 114 of its memorandum that the Venezuelan minister understood that arbitration or judicial settlement did not operate mechanically or unilaterally, but were subjected to an agreement negotiated by the parties, making equity a fundamental source of decision in accordance with an imperative of substantial judgment. Tellingly, There are no quotes around these words in Venezuela's memorandum, nor are there any citations, nor do these words, or words to the same or similar effect, appear anywhere in the foreign minister's contemporaneous statements. Venezuela's argument is exactly the opposite of what the foreign minister did say, that, quote, the only person participating in the selection of the means of solution will be the Secretary General of the United Nations. Mr. President, it is helpful that Venezuela has set out in detail its objections to the court's exercise of jurisdiction in this case, even if it did so in an untimely manner and without complying with the rules of court or the court's order of 19 June 2018. It remains, however, that by submitting those objections in written form in its letter of 18 June 2018, and more elaborately in its memorandum and annex of 28 November 2019, Venezuela has provided the court with its arguments, and it has enabled Guyana to respond to them and demonstrate that none of these objections to jurisdiction has any merit whatsoever. In Guyana's submission, the court should therefore reject them and proceed to the merits of the case. Mr. President, members of the court, this concludes my presentation. I thank you for your kind courtesy and patient attention, and I ask that you call Professor Sands to the podium.
I thank Mr. Reichler for his statement, and I now invite Professor Philip Sands to take the floor. You have the floor.
Mr. President, members of the court, it is a privilege to appear before you on behalf of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, even if it is from Hampstead in London. In this speech, I will explain how the conditions established by the Geneva Agreement were fulfilled between the signing of the agreement in 1966 and the decision of the Secretary General of the United Nations some 52 years later to choose this court as the next means of settling the controversy. The survey of events across more than half a century is fully set out in our written pleading, so I can be concise. I will make 4 points. First, all the conditions established by the Geneva Agreement have been properly implemented. Second, in accordance with those conditions, from 1983, the Secretary General of the United Nations was entrusted by the parties with responsibility to select the means of settlement of the controversy. Third, after more than 25 years of unsuccessful attempts to resolve the controversy through a good offices process, including a final year with a strengthened mandate of mediation, in 2018, the Secretary General selected the court as the means of settlement. The decision, his decision, was carefully considered, unimpeachable, lawful, and fully effective. Fourth, the Secretary General's decision was appropriate and inevitable. It was a recognition of the need to bring a fair and final end to a long-standing and destabilizing controversy. I begin with the implementation of the Geneva Agreement following its signature. In 1966, a mixed commission was established in accordance with Articles 1 and 2 of the agreement, as Mr. Reichler has explained. It comprised 2 representatives from each party, and its task was to seek, and I quote, satisfactory solutions for the practical settlement of the controversy, end of quote, arising from Venezuela's contention of nullity. The members of the Commission were eminently qualified to perform that